In our intermission in the workshop, we had a question that came out from someone in the audience, and I'd like to address that question so that those who are watching the video might have a little more clarity if this question comes up for you, and that is, what's the difference between an intention and a goal? You know, just really refining the difference. And I would offer that the goal is the intention that we have elevated to the point where we decide we want to make it behavior. So I might have a whole myriad of intentions, things I'd like to do, things I want to do. At some point, I'm going to convert one of those to action. I'm going to put my commitment behind it. Use an example. I decide that on my vacation next year, I'm going to...
No, I don't think the goal is for you to be competent. I think the goal that you want to start working on now is the goal to believe that you're competent. See, you're going to go into your file on belief about self. If you just do the goal to be competent, then you're going into your file about being competent. And that's the one you'll clean out. But when you go in and start cleaning up the beliefs you have about yourself, you're in a totally different part of the mind, healing a totally...
I'll just say that I had asked everybody to hold the space yesterday because I had to go to the physician today, and my blood work had come back with some questionable scales, and I love my physician. I'm just so open to, he's not listed as a naturopath, nor is his physician's assistant. However, they are so in line with what we teach, and that the mental and emotional manifest physically. And it was so easy to explain to her that we had been, working and processing and breathing, and that I was looking at a lot of things from my past abuse and settling it, and that I felt like I had moved, because of doing the inner work, had moved from being hypothyroidism to hyperthyroidism, and that it was just that my thyroid finally realized it was safe to operate instead of holding on. And so she was agreeable for me to do a natural supplement that helps calm the thyroid and to retest my blood in 3 months. And so I was just so glad that, I guess a part of me had some fear that she would want to medically treat it, and then I would swing in the other direction, like a pendulum. And I wanted to give it time for my so-called body to settle into the new norm and to adjust itself out to where it needed to be. And I feel like it will do that. And so, I had to cancel, what was underlying, the fear. And so now, it's everything is good to go, and they're on board with looking at just doing things natural and letting the process roll out. And so that's what we've talked about here before, is that your mental and emotional, your mind, your body, your spirit, everything is connected. And what impacts one impacts the others. And you have to look at the whole picture and look at cause and not just the effects. And, that's what this work is about, is to undo the underlying cause that is in our unconscious or even our conscious, and to get back to being whole. So welcome, Michael.
In framing and setting a goal, then you'll think when someone else frames it for you that you have to do it. There's this unconscious setting of it, but you have to set the goal. And of course, the person who doesn't just go along with the crowd is the person who doesn't...
Before you finally get it right, or there's no getting it right, but before you actually understand what you're doing, sometimes I've worked with people, and it's just like, we'll use the tools, even if you don't understand all of it, and eventually it comes, and repeatedly I've heard people, it's like, I've done 200 worksheets and now I get it, or whatever. But it reminds me of with Aria, and I think you said it's kind of like the Montessori school, that there is sensitive periods where you can absorb it so easily, and then other times.
And the opening words in the book of John, where we're told by the Greeks, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh. In Aramaic, what it says is in the beginning was the mind energy, and the mind energy became flesh. And when fear enters the human system as a drug to anesthetize against feeling, then it puts a layer of energy over the thyroid gland that inhibits its function, thyroidism. And, I really admire, honey, and acknowledge the level of work you've been doing the last several months. It was like that. Those 2 codependence intensives really kick-started and moved things, and the level of processing that you've done to deal with that fear have lifted that load, and my offering would be, yes, your thyroid is now in hyper because it's finding its balance, and it's going to have to do a little work to get back on track. But we hear those words from the book of John, and then we come forward 2,000 years, and our bright scientists who think they've got it all together, if you listen to the latest coming out of the cell biologist laboratory, they say that when you think of thought, they've proven in the lab, when you think of thought, that thought becomes a molecule. Mind energy becomes flesh. It becomes a literal molecule in your structure. And that molecule circulates around in the structure until it finds a cell with a receptor site that matches. It lands on the cell. And the cell, now, what the people in the lab are saying is that the cell then replicates the neuropeptide. I don't believe that's true. I think they're just off a little bit there. What actually happens is when the neuropeptide lands on the cell, in the same way that when a TV signal lands on an antenna, it in a sense, it inserts itself in the antenna and becomes a picture on your TV screen, flows through those wires and literally is turned into a picture by your television set. Well, in precisely the same way, when that neuropeptide lands on the cell, on the antenna, and literally, a cell becomes, they think that, the nucleus of the cell is what's really important. They've shown you can go, just like you'd open an orange and take the nucleus out, you can take everything outside and just have the shell left, that if you leave the receptor sites, the neuropeptides still have a place to land, and the cell still functions perfectly. Doesn't need a nucleus. Of course, the nucleus has its place and its work, but it's not the key to it. But if you go and take some enzymes and digest all the antenna, all the receptor sites on the cell becomes non-functional. The neuropeptide lands on the cell, and the cell, or the neuropeptide, the energy pattern of the thought, if you were looking from the inside of the cell, when it lands, it, in a sense, inserts itself, and literally, if we were inside the cell watching that neuropeptide land on the antenna, what comes into the antenna we call chemistry, or what comes into the cell, through the antenna, we call chemistry. Mind energy now becomes flesh. I mean, the understanding and the wisdom and the function of the mind in that ancient teaching is so profound. And the Greeks are like stunted little, they talk about the Greeks and how great their philosophies were. The truth is, when it comes to how the world actually works, those philosophies are so stunted and so lost compared to the Aramaic as to be, in a sense, a real joke. It's like it's got. If Yeshua sat in most so-called churches that try to replicate his teachings today in the Western world, he'd say that's all Greek to me, because that's what it is. It's Greek philosophy that's been put in his mouth. And you look at all the terrorism and the trauma that happens. I'm just hearing an announcement that today that the word that was used, quote unquote, terrorists on January 6th. The policemen are testifying, and they're saying it's clear that these people perceive themselves to be Christians. And it's like, what an oxymoron, Christian terrorists. How bizarre is that? How crazy is that? But if you've got Greek philosophy and your God's one that wants to, look at the Greek gods. They rape their own mothers. They murder their own children. It's insane. Or you watch what's done in the name of God from the Greek translations, you've got crazy time. Go back to the Aramaic. You listen to this man, Yeshua. He brings a whole correction. Everything that went before him. They talk about a new covenant. It isn't just a new covenant. It's a new understanding of what the Creator is about. The ancients had this horrible father that's going to out to get them and murder them if they're not doing the right thing. In fact, not only murder them, no, we're not going to murder them. We're going to torture them for eternity. Yeshua says, first of all, he doesn't say it's my Father. He says it's our Father. And he says, here's what the Creator brings. It is our Father's good pleasure to give us the community of love. Those words were mistranslated by the Greeks as the kingdom of heaven. It's the Creator's good pleasure to give you that. And you look at how many people are running around in fear and terror and trauma. Over 15 times in that New Testament, we hear Yeshua saying, fear not, fear not, fear not, fear not, fear not. And we hear these Greek preachers up there saying, the beginning of wisdom is fear of God. I beg your pardon. There is so much distortion and literal insanity there. People terrorized and traumatized by preachers up there screaming and raging about Satan and how Satan's going to... Excuse me? Let's look at the Aramaic Satan. In Aramaic, Satan means the resistor, one who misleads. You look at the average person today, and they're in trauma, and they tell you about how their trauma is somebody else's fault. And you say, well, actually, I noticed you've been through that trauma 87 different times with 42 different people. Did it ever occur to you that it might be yours and about you? What do people do? They go into resistance. Oh, no, this isn't about me. This is about, let me tell you the story about them and how they did it to me. And that's exactly the definition of Satan in the Aramaic. The resistor, one who misleads. That's all it means. It's not some dude with a red suit, a tail, and a pitchfork. And the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we buy into determine the way we behave. How can you have someone who believes in a creator whose good pleasure it is to give them the kingdom, literally the community of love, how can they become terrorists? They can't. But the story they've bought into is a terrorizing God. Now you've got people who will make great terrorists. And they'll buy anything you want to sell them. They'll tell you about how, yes, we need to have sexual integrity, and we need to have honesty, and we need to have. But when somebody comes along that does everything that's the opposite, if they offer them a little bonus, they'll buy it and support it. It's time for us to wake up to who we are as human beings. And the truth is, we are quite literally made in the image and likeness of that Creator who offers us the community of love freely for nothing, just for being created, that's offered to us. And when we accept it, we live in such a different world that it's almost unfathomable. And so the wake-up call is if you're living in pain and trauma in your life, notice that you've bought a story. And the story is a lie, because life is not designed to include pain and trauma. Pain and trauma are simply results from engaging in energetic patterns that produce pain and trauma. It is self-inflicted. In fact, let's look at the word sin. S-I-N, and I like to put that down to self-inflicted nonsense. And if you look at the word sin, the word sin in Aramaic is an archery term that simply means that someone is off the mark. They're out of alignment with their highest and best. And the result of being out of alignment with your highest and best is that you're going to experience pain. You're going to experience trauma. Of course, everybody's got the Satan game going really well. And so what do they say? I know whose fault it is. It isn't mine. I have nothing to do with this. Why would God let such a thing happen? Excuse me? The Creator doesn't let anything happen. The Creator creates, offers free will, and you get to do whatever you like with it. If you're living in pain and trauma, maybe it's time to shift to a different story. Maybe your parent, the Creator, has for you all kinds of awesome things in store and is not demanding obedience. It is not demanding compliance. It simply says, well, whatever story you want to engage in, you get to experience the effects of. If you want to engage in a story about drama and trauma and pain, and you want to do hate and fear and rage and guilt, then you'll get to experience the result of the mind energy, the story you engage in. And if you want to change your mind, you could log into a different story and create a different kind of function. And that's going to require the topic of our next chapter, be engaged. And our next chapter in the book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? We're going to read a few paragraphs from. Is chapter 16, Healing Abuse and Victimhood. If you're following along with us in the book, we're on page 93. And I've been speaking to this character, Richard, who's this recalcitrant kind of guy who showed up at Heartland one day. He isn't a real person. He's a composite of real people that I've worked with, weaved a story, including many more issues than he as one individual had. And so he's been through a lot of abuse and victimhood. He shared with us already in the book in his childhood, and he's done a lot of abuse and created lots of victims in his life. And he's kind of at the point where he's ready to start to change his mind. So we start out chapter 16 with, it's clear to me now, Richard says, how I've set myself up. Strange as it sounds, I was comfortable in the role of a victim. I've practiced it all my life. I didn't realize I caused trauma that was my constant companion. It seemed to benefit me to show how wounded I was, how much of a victim I was, because people didn't hold me accountable. It seemed to save me from further punishment and put me in control. I can now see, however, the first step in the process of becoming victim was my choice to be victimized. And the key thought that arrives here is there are no victims, only volunteers. We volunteer with the realities we hold. Richard goes on and says, as I look at it, I can see I purposely played the victim role to keep people from victimizing me. What manipulation, what a twisted way I've used people, he mumbled to himself. As I think about it, I fed on the energy of fear. It was that and anger. They seem to be my only two choices. Wow, I really have some work to do if I'm going to change the foundation of my relationships from fear and anger to love. So Richard's starting to see his way out of a lifetime. When he showed up, he's on his third marriage or on his third divorce, and knows that the problem is all the women in his life, and all he has to do is get out of Dodge. That's what he was doing. He was leaving his hometown in order to escape, taking the geographic cure, and heading out west. Heartland happened to be on the way, and a friend of his says, hey, why don't you drop by and have a conversation with Michael Ryce? Maybe he can support you. And so this book is are fabricated conversation about some very real principles that tie into the first century Aramaic process of healing. And that's what we are here to support happening in our world, is the healing process. So we're honored and delighted that you're here to be part of this conversation. And Miss Jeannie, we've still got about 21 or 22 minutes left. So do we have anybody out there in the phone queue with a hand up or anything happening?
You actually have 40 minutes left.
40 minutes, right? Yes.
Yeah. No, it's all quiet on the home front. And so if you all that are listening have a question, if you're on another station, you have to dial in at 563-999-3581 and then press 1. And we've got a hand up, and I believe it's Miss Magda, 828. You're on the air.
Hey, young lady.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, and thank you for all the work you guys did to get us in and out of there, and the food you gave us, and all of it. Much appreciation.
Wow. Well, you're so very, very welcome. And I just have to comment about how much you've done to get everything unpacked and cleaned and put in its place in such a short amount of time. You're really a good role model for me, Jeannie, and maybe Michael. I know Jeannie was involved because it's her little shoes, right?
Jeannie's done a lot more than I did.
It was my little shoes and tea sets. Yeah, Michael's not collecting those yet. But I've got one cabinet about halfway, so I still have to go on it. But the other two cabinets are complete, and it's just awesome. And when Aria came yesterday morning, we had the lights on it, and she was like, "Oh, wow, I love it."
Well, thank you for sending the pictures because they're gorgeous. They're just really beautiful. So I'm glad you got everything home and that you guys are back and settling in.
Yeah.
And
she's wondering how she had it all in the cabinets. That was the question this morning. It's like,
how
did I get this all in 3 cabinets?
I know. We were remarking about that when we were taking the pieces out, like, wow, and there's more back here, you know.
And there's stories behind almost every one of them. As I was unpacking them and washing them off, I was like, oh, this one happened here, and this is, so there's stories there. Yeah, so thank you.
You're welcome. And I appreciate the pictures very much. So I'm calling in desperation for some help. Got any help available?
Absolutely, a ton of it.
Okay, good. I need it. I am in a very stuck place. I have to get a notebook here. I didn't intend to call, but my better angels made me press number 1.
We're glad you did.
Good, me too. So, remember way back when Chuck and I did the responsibility communication, way back, a couple months ago, and my stuckness really started there. I didn't realize until later, after I had completed that and gave the feedback and, on the second class. And then I realized, golly, I'm not doing any worksheets now. I'm not doing any mind shifters. I'm not doing anything. And I'll say that I really, and I think you know this, but I will say it again, I very much appreciate the tools. The worksheets are a miracle. They help us all produce miracles within ourselves. And so many of the tools that you have are absolutely fantastic. And by the way, Chuck and I are doing the commitment with each other every morning. So that's a tool that's getting used. However, the fact that I'm not doing any worksheets is like, So I called and talked with Dr. Tim, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and we got to the bottom of why that might be happening, and it appears that it is because I believe that I'm going to use the word incompetent, that I'm not able to really do my work the way it should be done, and that comes from the realization that I thought I knew how to do the responsibility communication tool the right way after all of these years of trying to learn about it. And then, of course, there was so much that I needed to do differently. And so, and your feedback was great. It was a fantastic class. And I think, though, at the bottom of it, somehow I took away the message that somehow I'm not able to handle. I'm not able to do it. I'm incompetent. Anyway, I'm stuck to the point where I'm realizing that I don't have any, I want to do worksheets and I don't have any gusto to actually do it. And I don't know what I need to do or to have to get me to push the button to actually sit down and do the work. Because there's a lot to work on, of course. So
well,
that's my thing.
My take is that if you go back and listen to your feedback when we did the second class, when you stepped into the responsibility communication, you opened very wide and deep a space for you to look into everything that you have spent, as most of us do, your whole life, trying to keep hidden from yourself. You opened it in a whole new way. And one of the things I observe and have observed over the decades working with people is when they hear, wow, I can work through all this, that is so exciting, and they want to do it, until you look in there and you go, holy crap, I have to work through that? And it becomes too much. There's a point where it's just like overwhelm, kind of like the story of the flood. And so my offering would be what I would see, and I've watched this happen over and over and over again. People get excited about the tools. They start to use the tools until they start to look at the next level of their own minds. And then there's a time period where it's just blotto. It's just too much. It's like, how can I do this? And then what I've observed is that people who stick with it, keep building the brain cells, then come to the point where they realize they can work through it, and they start to chip away at it one piece at a time, realizing that you don't have to do it all at once. So my take is, when I think about you, as you reviewed the actual video of the responsibility communication, and I invite you to maybe go back and do that again, the insight you got was just such into your own unconscious dynamics, was so deep and so profound that it's a shock to the system. Wait a minute, how's this possible if this is true about me?
Yeah.
And that drives one deeply into the resistor. And so that'd be my offering. And, just gently, be gentle with yourself, take care of yourself. Maybe when you're in that state where it's too much, that's where you go just take a bath, light a candle, and breathe in the bathtub and just, take care of yourself and be gentle with yourself. And realize that, you don't have to do it all at once. And that there's another thing that happens is that people get a look into that part of their minds and they think, oh my God, how terrible I am, or how how unfathomable, how unresolvable is this? And then when you realize that you're in the same boat as everybody. You know, we've talked about how much work Jeannie's done in the last year, 2 years since we've been here. There's just been huge amounts of work done. And I really, Jeannie, admire you for what you've done and the courage you've had to jump in and go for it. And you've done such a huge amount of work in such a short period of time. I look back and I look at my own process over a period of 50 years of, you know, little bit by little bit, getting these things to open, doing the work, running through, you know, one example that comes to mind, you've heard this before, was the first summer we were at Heartland and we went on a canoe trip. And, you know, my spine, my brother's in the printing business, and he had printed a book for me at one time that had a particular picture of me when I was about 26. And it's a side view picture, and if you look at my spine, if you look at an old man or an old woman, at the top of their spine you see the dowager's hump on them, their head pushed forward. That's what my spine was like. Now, if you look at my spine today, it's pretty straight, and it's pretty naturally straight. And it took me decades to process that and go through that. And the first summer, we had this canoe trip, and I had so much pain, and this went on for the pain in my spine probably 3 years. But that particular time, we went on a canoe trip, and I had to sit in the middle of I had so much pain in my spine, I could not even hold a paddle in the canoe. Now I look at that and I realize it took me years to discover, understand, and move through those things and develop the tools with which to deal with them for myself and support others in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I watch how much and how quickly Jeannie has moved through in such a short period of time. And, you know, I mean, sometimes we'll be in processing something, and it will be physical, mental, emotional work, the whole gamut. And I'll say to Jeannie, you know, it's like, how could we ever explain this to anyone, what we're doing here? How could we ever transfer the level of work that we're doing and really have people understand it? And the only way we could do it, of course, is over a period of time. But the intensity of it and sometimes the physiological contortions that happen when you're moving through things are pretty intense. And so be gentle with yourself, be willing, and pick up the tools as you're ready. And, you know, and so you've taken a sabbatical. But, you just looked in a pretty deep pit. Yeah. And I understand stepping back from going, holy crap, can I actually do this? Yes, you can.
Thank you.
But you did an extra wide opening and a really profound piece of work.
Yeah,
that's my offering.
And you did a phenomenal job of it too, Magda. I mean, you're saying, I don't know how to use this tool. You were fabulous.
Well, thank you. Thank you both.
You brought the tool to a whole new level of understanding for me. That's why the new worksheet information's out there after 25 years of teaching that and almost not changing it at all.
Great. So if I can crawl out of my hole of the martyr, who really doesn't know how to do it, I would be able to sit up at the top and realize that what you're saying is true. Because I've heard you say it before, and there's part of me, of course, that is discounting it. He doesn't really know.
And how many times?
Like Michael doesn't really know. Go ahead.
How many times did your power person tell you how incompetent you were?
Yeah, daily, in one way or another.
So notice that you're giving yourself that message, and that I would offer as your primary message to forgive at this point.
Yeah. Okay.
And, start to see yourself from a place outside of that perception. The person who looks in the mirror and they see they're fat, and they say to somebody, "You're fat," and everybody looks and goes, "What are you talking about? You don't have an ounce of fat on you. What are you talking about? That's crazy." And they look in the mirror, and because their perception is based in "I'm fat," they see that, and they don't see themselves realistically. A good tool to use in that place is, well, gee, I've had 5 different people that tell me that that's a foolish thought. So maybe I should entertain that that's a foolish thought, and maybe my mind is lying to me, and maybe I'm not fat. And so my offering is, I see you as competent and capable, and my testimony to you in this responsibility communication tool is, after 25 years of me teaching it, you taking on using the tool and the questions you roused in doing it because of the skill you developed at using it, totally opened and totally changed it for me. So I'm going to invite you to take a third-person view and maybe trust what I'm telling you rather than trusting you what your own mind is telling you that your power person told you. And go, oh, I actually transformed this tool with the work I did. Maybe this perceptual construct about myself, and start to see yourself through that other set of eyes.
Thank you.
The eyes of acknowledgement.
Okay. Thank you. I think you hit all of the points that are really pertinent, and what I wrote down that I shall be reminding myself is, be gentle with myself, and that I will begin to use the tool again. I really will, but when I'm ready. And remember that I don't
and
have
throw away the lies.
Yeah. Throw away the lies.
Absolutely. Be about forgiving the lies.
Okay.
That's the breath we needed right there.
Yeah. So incompetence means if I'm believing that I'm incompetent in that area, then the goal I would be dealing with is to be competent, and that's the goal I need to cancel. Would that be right?
Well,
Michael,
actually,
talking,
here, just a slight refinement. I had my mute button on and the screen went off. A slight refinement would be...
Screen's going, why would I cancel? That's the hard question.
Can I ask a question?
No, hold on for just a second, sweetie. Notice that as long as you hold content, messages from your power person that you're not competent, then when you load the goal to be competent or believe that you're competent, then your mind is going to generate a perceptual construct of self as incompetent, because that's what's in that file in your mind. When you cancel the goal, that's when you get to collapse that pained perception in on itself and get to the root energy of it, that when you bring it forward in the presence of love, it begins to dissolve and disappear. Then my offering is the next goal that you'd want to work on would be the goal to be seen as competent. I.e., has it ever happened that you're interacting with Chuck and the message you get from Chuck you perceive as him seeing you or calling you incompetent, or anyone else for that matter? So they'd be two separate goals that would lead you to cleaning up these unconscious dynamics. And then you might get back to the goal of, the desire to have mom, dad, sister, brother, whoever it was, to see you as competent. Or maybe, a former spouse or So there'd be all those aspects, and as you collapse into each of those, and there's probably going to be some pretty deep pain, because you remember one of the dynamics that instills a power person issue into the mind is it's perceived as survival. And so when the message came that you weren't competent, that was your psychological survival. And that's what would drive that in deeper, the desire to survive psychologically as a competent being. So all of that would be tied up in this issue, would be my offering. And you'd chip away a piece at a time. This is going to be probably one of your 77 times 70 issue worksheets.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Oh, thank you.
So, Jeannie, you had a thought?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and this maybe just for me that it was different, and it might not be different for you. But when you said your goal, I want to believe I'm confident, change it to just the goal that I believe I'm confident, and take out that I want to. I don't know, that's very gray area, but for me it was like, it's almost like saying try. To say I want to believe versus just saying I believe I'm confident.
Okay, that's interesting, because I always frame my goals in the I want to.
Okay.
So that's something to think about, though. Yeah.
And add in the line that of the worksheet, and I think of you every time I use the worksheet, is so I can.
Well, I can.
Because it's actually a goal under the goal.
Yeah, and usually a lot of them, actually. Yeah, I have that printed on my little short cheat sheet. I always have that in. And I think of you when I use it, too. Thank you. This has been very, very helpful. Thank you so much. And I'm breathing differently.
Well, there you go. We get to be truly helpful, and that's what we're here for.
Bless you. All right.
Well, bless you.
Yeah, well, you are. And so I just realized that I've been stuck like this for a long time, but I haven't called for help because I haven't been desperate enough. There's nothing going on in my life that is just so horrible that I need some help. It's just, I just backed off. And so there's something here for me about...
You have to be competent.
Say it again.
Of course, you have to be competent.
So if I ask for help, it shows that I'm not competent.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your meaning?
So that might just be another one of those Hydra pieces. You're good at those Hydra worksheets, remember?
Yeah, I am. Okay. That's great. That opens a whole new area. Okay. Well, thank you. This is very exciting. So I will ring off and listen to the next person, and bless you both. And thank you both.
It is exciting, and thank you again for having the brain cells to ask the question that open this refinement for people, because this is going to serve everybody, not just you. And seeing the importance of the goal and the shades of how the mind operates to keep us tricked into the old power person messages and believing that they're the truth when they're all lies.
Absolutely, the tricks that the mind plays. Very
unlimited.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, I shall listen, and bless you for all the work you're doing, and have a wonderful day, you guys.
Sweet. You too. Blessings. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, good conversation. Nice work, Magda. Thank you. The questions are so important in whatever stage somebody's at in doing their work. The willingness to push one and ask the question opens refinements that, otherwise, without the interaction with you, we'd never think of. It would never open. So that's one of the reasons we appreciate it when you push one and ask your question. Even if your question seems like, oh, this is a silly one or such a basic one, whatever. Moving through it. Thank you again, Magda. Tell Chuck the food was delicious. When we were out at Heartland, Magda and Chuck and Julie helped us pack stuff up and helped us load the trailer. And we'd have been there for another 4 days. We were thinking, oh, we can have all this done and be gone in a day. Well, after spending a very full day with 3 of them helping us, we still had the next day a 22-hour day before we got home. By the time we got back, went back to Heartland and picked up the things we need to bring along. So much appreciation for the assistance. And we've got about 15 minutes left, so there's lots of time for another good conversation or two. Again, if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, our call-in number is 563-999-3581. Call that number. You'll be listening to the show. And if you push 1, we'll be having a conversation. How can we support you? What's on your mind?
Times, it's like you hit a block and don't get it. And when you're in those sensitive periods, then just, absorb and grab it and go for it. And maybe you have to change tools every now and then and do one, and then later maybe another one makes more sense. Kind of like our friend who she wouldn't ever do the forgiveness worksheets, and then all of a sudden she started doing it, and it was like she loved it. So even as adults, I think we can have sensitive periods where we just absorb and understand, where other times it's like bounces off. If
right
you're
on
talking,
track.
I can't hear you.
Sweetie. Yep. No, you're right on. I'm in full agreement with you. Those sensitive periods when we're ready to do a piece of work, I mean, that's when it's there to be done, for sure.
And I think that's why it's made it easier for you and I to continue, the depth that we've been going to. And, we hadn't done that in the years that I've known you. I mean, we've done our work, but it's like at a different level. And I think it's opening and we're willing and just absorbing everything that Spirit's given us. So it's different.
Well, yeah, and I think, sweetie, that maybe a piece of it is that instead of doing Heartland for the summer, getting in the car and spending the next 8 months going to 30 different cities, moving in and out of people's homes, doing workshops, and then moving to the next city and the next city and the next city and the next city. The fact that we actually put our heads down in the same pillow every night, night after night, and been doing that for 2 years has definitely created a different space for us to move forward. And
I agree.
It warms my heart to just think about you. So you are deeply appreciated. Deeply, deeply,
Thank
deeply.
You. You too. So we have 10 minutes. We can do another conversation. Press 1.
Yes, if you're out there in listener land, let's talk. How can we support you? And if there are no callers, I have enough on my plate that I'm willing to call it a day and just say that, tomorrow we'll be back again at 1 o'clock and look forward to whatever conversations we can have to support the healing, literally, of every mind, heart, and being on the planet. We appreciate you being here. Create the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Blessings. Bye-bye.